I'm not paying for his snacks or whatever he chooses to buy at this bakery.
Protesters call for Duncan Hunter's resignation today as the congressman heads back to court.
People don't know what they're getting when they ingest these drugs, and it leads to overdoses, and sometimes those overdoses result in death.
A new response team to fight San Diego's soaring number of drug overdoses. And what does the Trump administration's policy of allowing fewer refugees into the country mean for refugees already here? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The trial for indicted Congressman Duncan Hunter and his wife Margaret won't happen until after the midterm elections. KPBS reporter Jade Hyman was there this morning as the pair was back in court.
Attorneys for Duncan Hunter and his wife asked for more time to prepare before setting a trial date. Hunter, who was met by protesters calling for his resignation outside of the federal court building, said his campaign is still on.
We're still running and we're going to win.
Lock him up. Lock him up.
Meanwhile, protesters were at the courthouse to speak out against the congressman.
I wanted to express my displeasure with Representative Duncan Hunter. I'm so unhappy with the example that he's setting and representing San Diego. It's really sad to me.
The Hunters are accused of misusing $250,000 of campaign funds on everything from vacations to grocery shopping. In front of the federal courthouse, protesters even displayed bags from each retailer the Hunters allegedly spent campaign funds at, as listed in the indictment. As the congressman dipped into a coffee shop avoiding cameras, protester Kevin Stevenson made this point clear.
I'm not paying for his snacks or whatever he chooses to buy at this bakery.
Jade Hyman, KPBS News.
The next status hearing for the Hunters is scheduled for December 3rd. President Trump and Senate Republican leaders are defending Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh amid new allegations of sexual misconduct. The latest claim is from a woman named Deborah Ramirez. She told the New Yorker magazine that Kavanaugh exposed himself to her during a college party in the early 80s. Kavanaugh put out a statement that denies this latest accusation. He says he's being smeared, and President Trump agrees.
For people to come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political. It is totally political. Thank you.
Dozens of people were arrested at the Capitol today while protesting Kavanaugh's nomination. Kavanaugh and his first accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, will testify Thursday before senators. Bill Cosby was in court today as lawyers argued over how much time the TV star should serve and where. Defense attorneys argue Cosby should be held on something akin to house arrest, while prosecutors asked for 5 to 10 years in prison. Cosby was convicted in April of drugging and sexually assaulting a woman. The judge is expected to sentence him tomorrow. Enough is enough. That's the name of a new voter project campaigning against politicians perceived to be soft on sexual misconduct. It's led by a Stanford University law school professor who successfully spearheaded the recall of Judge Aaron Persky. He's the judge who gave Brock Turner a 6-month sentence. Turner served 3 months for sexually assaulting an unconscious woman at a Stanford University frat party. Leaders say with the Enough is Enough voter project, they will continue to target politicians who don't take violence against women seriously. A soaring number of fentanyl-related overdoses in San Diego County has prompted the formation of a new overdose response team. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy talked to the DEA agent heading the group.
We're seeing more overdoses, and we're seeing fentanyl in methamphetamine, recently in cocaine. We've seen it in heroin.
DEA Assistant Agent in Charge Colin Ruane is heading the overdose response team, made up of local, state, and federal law enforcement, health officials, and a medical examiner. He says the task force will investigate overdoses, link batches of drugs, and go after the dealers and cartels.
As they distribute down the chain. We're investigating up the chain. And we want to take it as high as we can get it and find out who's ultimately responsible for it and bring them to justice and charge them appropriately. Everybody from the person who dealt to the person who overdosed to the person who brought it into the country to begin with from the cartels.
Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that can be up to 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. According to the California Department of Public Health, San Diego County's fentanyl overdose death rate was twice the California rate last year, with nearly 150 fentanyl-related fatalities.
People don't know what they're getting when they ingest these drugs, and it leads to overdoses, and sometimes those overdoses result in death.
Ruane says the problem will likely get worse because the profit margin for cartels and dealers is huge.
I wish we didn't have the consumption problem we have, but the only way you're going to keep yourself 100% safe is not partake in the ingestion of drugs. Don't do it. And if you have someone who does overdose, please call and get them help.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Medical experts are taking a hard look at their hospital emergency response procedures following last year's string of devastating wildfires. Doctors, nurses, and fire officials attended the first day of a 3-day seminar on disaster planning. The group is discussing lessons learned from last year's North Bay fires when crowds of staff and patients were evacuated from hospitals at a moment's notice. Nurses discussed the need for more supplies, but said the biggest challenge during the evacuations was communication.
I think everybody during any disaster, that becomes their primary struggle. You have to be able to communicate with EMS. You have to be able to communicate with your personnel. You have to be able to communicate with other organizations.
Emergency medical workers say they're working hard to update California's hospital communications system and have already begun making improvements statewide. SDG&E customers can expect lower bills next month thanks to a San Onofre nuclear power plant settlement. SDG&E says residential customers will see a 1-month refund of about $14 plus an ongoing average bill reduction of about $1.32 per month. Originally, utility customers were stuck with 70% of the nearly $5 billion cost of closing the nuclear plant. Now, with the settlement with Southern California Edison and SDG&E, consumers' costs will be reduced by $775 million. By 2020, people who vote by mail will be able to literally track their ballots. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says California counties, including San Diego, will have the option to use this tracking service.
This new tracking system would allow voters to get a text or email about their ballot. Notifications would come when ballots are sent in the mail and once they've been picked up and officially counted. The system must be in place by 2020, and the bill designates the Secretary of State to create it. Current Secretary of State for California, Alex Padilla, says the system will work similar to tracking a package.
With the increasing popularity of vote by mail or vote at home, it only makes sense for all counties to eventually, but hopefully sooner rather than later, implement this tool. It's good for election transparency and accountability, and it's certainly great for voters.
San Diego County Registrar of Voters Michael Vu says infrastructure would need to be built to use the tracking system here. He says the Registrar of Voters will consider it. Now, Vu added that voters can already check online when their ballot was issued and received. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Another demand from California officials today calling on the Trump administration to hit the brakes on a plan to roll back national fuel economy standards. The White House says this would make vehicles more affordable. California Attorney General Javier Becerra disagrees, saying that will contribute to climate change. Becerra tweeted today that California has congressional backing to set tougher clear car standards, and the EPA has not complained. He also says those who support states' rights should make sure they're not trampling on ours. Hotel workers at Disneyland have approved a labor contract with the company. Employers at the happiest place on earth will get hourly raises of at least 40% over 2 years and bonuses promised last year. The minimum wage will also increase to $15 an hour. The Los Angeles Times reports the 5-year contract covers about 2,700 workers, including housekeepers, valets, cooks, servers, and other staff. California educators will have new resources to teach media literacy next year. Capitol Public Radio reporter Chris Nichols has more.
The new law requires the state to publish a list of media literacy resources online. The goal is to help students better evaluate different sources of digital information, to help them distinguish between news stories and advertisements, for example. Media literacy advocate Tessa Joels says the bill is the first in decades to address the topic statewide. Still, she says it's only one step, noting more extensive media literacy bills have stalled at the Capitol.
We've been waiting 30 years for this kind of passage to happen. Hopefully, we can keep at it and continue to build on this really strong beginning.
State Senator Bill Dodd authored the bill. He said it was inspired by a recent Stanford study that found more than 80% of middle school students struggled to distinguish between ads and news. In Sacramento, I'm Chris Nichols.
Tonight on the NewsHour, new accusations of sexual assault throw Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation into further question. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The Trump administration recently announced another record-low cap on refugee arrivals. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto says this means more uncertainty for people overseas, but it also is causing layoffs, program cuts, and closures at agencies serving refugees here in Southern California.
What did you do before? Tell me about yourself.
An instructor asks newly arrived refugees how they made a living in their home countries. One woman says she was a farmer.
A farmer? And Uganda.
There was also a butcher and a woman who sold tomatoes and bananas. They're preparing responses to typical job interview questions in a vocational English as a second language class, also known as VESSEL. The program combines instruction in language and job readiness. Nearly 24 of its students are already earning a paycheck. But the program is losing money.
We were notified that we were going to see a 34% reduction in the funds that support that program.
Donna Duvin leads the International Rescue Committee's office in San Diego. IRC holds a county contract to offer the course to refugees after they're first resettled. But fewer arrivals means fewer government dollars for programs like VESSEL.
As the numbers began to fall, the support that we had from the county that was passed through dollars from the federal government, those declined as well.
Cuts to the VESSEL program are just one example of this ripple effect. The IRC saw an 85% drop in arrivals since 2016. This caused budget challenges, and the organization eliminated 15 positions over the 2 years. That includes 2 employees who were former refugees. Duvin says the agency also pulled more than half its staff away from housing new arrivals and toward programs that support thousands of refugees already living here.
We've got the ability to support refugees and asylees and vulnerable populations beyond that initial period through many of the programs that we have developed over time, and those are the programs in particular that are really growing and being sustained with private support now.
An agency in Orange County has shifted away from resettling refugees altogether. Jose Serrano at World Relief Southern California says it now focuses on legal and immigration services.
And so we were already managing and doing that on as another department. And it just happened to be that with the current administration, the number of refugees entering the United States decreased drastically. Therefore, we were forced to kind of just focus on immigration and legal services.
Other offices across the country, including in Orange County, have closed entirely. That leaves previous refugee arrivals without the help of the agency that first resettled them.
What does the Constitution do? I don't know.
Classrooms at San Diego Continuing Education are also feeling the impact. President Carlos Turner Cortez says enrollment was down this year for courses that typically serve refugees.
Seeing approximately a 30% decline, and we anticipate, as we're tracking numbers in other programs, that the numbers are going to have a even greater decline as a result of some of the actions that have been taken at the border regarding asylum seekers over the past summer.
The decline is mostly affecting courses in English and basic skills, but Turner Cortez says he expects to see a larger impact on citizenship classes over the next year. He says campuses are compensating by adding classes in other areas.
We pivot and we respond to these economic and demographic shifts, and we are expanding our 75-plus free job training programs.
A spokeswoman for San Diego County says so far its refugee employment and support programs are making do with the budget reductions because the population it serves is also slightly smaller. But the agency expects to learn about more cuts this week. And even bigger changes to the national resettlement system are coming. The State Department says it'll fund fewer agencies next year. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The agency's next fiscal year begins October 1st. An experimental new treatment offers spinal cord injury patients and doctors the hope that paralysis could someday be reversible. AP reporter Kathy Young has the story.
Jared Chinnock was paralyzed from the waist down after a snowmobile accident in 2013. But 5 years later, he's able to walk again with assistance.
To be able to move my legs and to walk, even to stand, it means a lot. That there's hope for not only me, but other people.
In an experimental procedure, doctors at the Mayo Clinic implanted an electrical stimulation device that zaps his spinal cord below the site of his injury.
We were able to stimulate directly the spinal cord itself, and we believe that that was very important to be able to regain the volitional control or voluntary control.
A month later, Chinnock's first big breakthrough came when he was able to voluntarily move his legs.
Felt in awe, and excited.
With rigorous physical therapy, Chinnock is now able to walk while balancing with a rolling walker during physical therapy sessions, one time the equivalent length of a football field. His progress highlighted in a paper published in the journal Nature Medicine.
Over time, we were really excited to see the results and to see that he was able to achieve something more functional.
The research is the latest in the quest to help people with spinal cord injuries gain control and function of paralyzed limbs. Dr. Charla Fisher, who was not part of the study, says the results are encouraging.
I think the results of the study are exciting, and we'll have to wait and see where they go. But I think it does give hope to some patients with spinal cord injury.
In a separate study at the University of Louisville, 4 more paralyzed patients are also testing this approach. 2 of them eventually were able to walk with assistance like Chinnock. That study is published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Further research is underway to understand why some patients are responding to the stimulator and how it might help others.
We still have a long way to go before we can optimize this therapy, make it relevant to other patients.
The spinal stimulator isn't a cure. Chinnock can't feel his feet or legs, and when turned off, he can no longer voluntarily move. Chinnock credits a woman he met after his accident for giving him the strength to endure his rigorous therapy, which he undergoes several times a week.
The girl that helped me is now my wife, and she pushes me hard.
Chinnock willing to push the bounds of technology and his body to make big strides towards his goals. Kathy Young, Associated Press.
Some clouds today around San Diego County, but the sun is expected to return tomorrow with no sign of rain anytime soon. Erin Calandra has tonight's forecast.
Well, I hope you enjoyed your weekend and your Monday. Hopefully it's not getting off to a bad start. The weather is pretty nice. We're not seeing a lot happening right now around San Diego County. The radar is quiet, and the big picture, well, it's pretty quiet. We do have a front moving across the northern plains, so a tail end of that moving across parts of Utah and places like the Grand Canyon in Arizona could see a shower, but none of that is going to reach us. What you will notice is a couple of clouds lingering tonight and into tomorrow morning right along the coast. So Oceanside at 61, San Diego at 64 tonight, and Ramona around 55. It's going to be quiet and clear in Borrego Springs, 70 for the low tonight. And in the metro, again, cloudy. It'll be still cloudy when you wake up, but then you'll see plenty of sunshine, 64 for the low. We have this dry air air pushing down from the north. So it's going to be very seasonable on Tuesday. Isolated showers and storms in New Mexico. Again, that is going to have zero impact on us. Temperatures in Oceanside at 74, Chula Vista around 74, and also in San Diego. Ramona 84 and Mount Laguna at 73 with sunny skies. The big picture, well, the West Coast is quiet. Look at that. Warm and dry, pretty nice. The East Coast is a mess. We have a cold front moving across the region, lots of rain, and also a low pressure system spinning around out by the Carolinas. We do expect them to see some rain in North Carolina in the flooded areas Tuesday into Wednesday. So that is not going to be a beneficial rain for them as they are still recovering from the hurricane. But here we are along the coast for the 5-day forecast, mainly in the 70s all week long with clear conditions. Inland, expect to see our temperatures in the 80s, peaking close to 90 on Thursday. That will be the warmest day of the week. In the mountains, we are in the 70s. Again, Thursday, the warmest day of the week, reaching close to 80 degrees. And in the deserts, well, it's going to be cooking in the 100s until we get to Saturday. That's when we get a break down to 97. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
San Diegans are used to superheroes and comic characters piling into downtown every year. But it's a rarer sight in the rural region of Russia. The city of Yekaterinburg is hosting its first comic and fandom convention. Organizers say they've invited 45 comic writers from across the country to Yukon, and they expect more than 200 cosplayers to compete.
Thanks to such events, people who come to play computer games or cosplay get engaged into comics, and those who come to read comics get engaged into cosplay or computer games. So it's all interconnected, the geek culture.
Sounds a lot like San Diego's own Comic-Con. An Iraqi-American poet, Danya Makel, fled her home country of Iraq after she discovered she was being targeted by Saddam Hussein's regime. In tonight's report from Detroit Public TV, she talks about her poetry and a special memento from her journey.
Passport that's special that I kept, although it's expired, but the reason that I'll always keep is that it's unique. It says that my profession is a poet. Although it's expired, I'll always keep it. It says here expired on May 19th, 94. And that's the time or the day I left my country, Baghdad. Being a poet, you don't need a leave of absence from anywhere. I started to think of myself as a poet first in high school. And then in the college, I had my first book published, and that was in Baghdad. It was not my intention to make peace or to change the world. That was not my goal. I don't believe that poetry has these type of tasks. Before coming here, I always, write in Arabic. I don't even think about the translation or English. Then I realized this language issue that you have this duality, not only duality of being, duality of existence, duality of memories, but duality of language. When you write a poem in your language, you write it one time. And when you think in the other language and try to write a poem in the other language, I feel as if it's a new poem. They say lost in translation, but also as things found in translation. I became American citizen in the year 2007, and I earned that hyphen. Now I became Iraqi American. And contemplating, looking at that, I was thinking that hyphen, I always think of it. And it looks like a subtraction, but it's actually a plus. In reality, it adds to you. When people ask me, are you going to go back? I feel it's a strange question, as if I have to go back to a dream. And sometimes you feel like, was it you really that you were in that place? Did you see all that? Will I see what I know? Will I know what I see? I mean, it is really, I feel as if I woke up from that life. People say it's exile, they call it, but really this is for me, if I have to call it exile, then maybe I would say, exile, sweet exile.
Mikkel has published several collections of poetry in Arabic and English. In 2001, she was awarded the Human Rights Award for Freedom of Writing. A pair of tiny furry fighters gets a second chance. Meet Tina and Turner. Animal rescue workers found them in Anaheim back in July. They suffered extensive burns from head to toe. They're now recovering at Helen Woodward Animal Center in Rancho Santa Fe. Workers treated them with medicated baths and antibiotics. They're trying to have the kittens adopted together. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, this could be ready to blast off before Space Force, the new program taking a chance on space mining. And on Midday Edition, sharing the stories of the men and women who serve. We have a preview of the 4th annual GI Film Festival in San Diego. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/Evening Edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.